I'm AP Townley, and this is Roleplay Culture. It's time to put the sword in Swords and Sorcery. Welcome to the last stop in our quest for cantrips for the different classes in D&D, or in this case, subclasses. Just like with one of our previous episodes about the Arcane Trickster, we're now discussing subclasses that give the spellcaster to their spell-less parent classes. In this case, we're discussing the fighter's Eldritch Knight. There's no way around it. People like playing the Gish, myself included. The Gish, if you don't know, is a very old-school term for players who like sword and sorcery in equal measure, and they make characters that utilize both. This can sometimes result in some really weird multi-classing Frankenstein-like character builds, but not the Eldritch Knight. It's a built-in Gish-style character for the fighter, no multi-classing required. Though of course, there are ways to min-max it as there are in all things. But to measure the power of the Eldritch Knight, we need to look at its simplest magic, the cantrip, that it has available and see how they work and how they interact with the Knight's abilities. So here are 3 cantrips for the Eldritch Knight fighter in D&D 5e. Oh man, only 3, and I thought the ones with 4 were bad. Number 1, Toll the Dead. How have we not talked about this spell yet? This 0th level necromancy spell takes an action to cast. It has a range of 60 feet. You assault the target with a dong of bells. Then make a wisdom saving throw or take 1d8 necrotic damage. So nothing particularly special at this point, rather mediocre if I say so myself. But it's the secondary effect where things get interesting. If the target has taken some damage, any damage at all, the cantrip will instead do 1d12 necrotic damage. And then at levels 5, 11, and 17, we add another die to the attack as normal. So by level 17, if the target is missing even just 1 hit point and failed their save, they'll take 4d12 necrotic damage. That's an average of 26 points of damage. Not too shabby for a fighter. And it's a saving throw spell, so you can use it against enemies that are within 5 feet of you without taking any kind of penalty. True, in those cases, it would be better to just execute a melee attack with your weapon, but that won't always be the case. There are some oozes that you really don't want touching your shiny blade. You might run into enemies that are particularly difficult to attack. Maybe they have the blur spell going, or just a really high AC. The parry feature, maybe. Either way, this spell will bypass such defenses and let you be a little more flexible in how you can tackle certain enemies. Number 2, Chill Touch. Honestly, Firebolt will work just as well here. What we're really looking for is an attack cantrip with a longer range, in this case, 120 feet. You might be thinking, wait, we've already got 2 ranged attack cantrips. Why are we picking another? We've only got 3 precious cantrips to choose from. Why another one? But there is a logic to my madness, I promise. I like the secondary effect of Chill Touch, which is why I choose it over the harder hitting Firebolt. This necromantic cantrip takes an action to cast, has a range of 120 feet, as we said. You make a spell attack roll, and on a hit, you do 1d8 necrotic damage. You add more dice at the appropriate levels. There are 2 secondary effects with this spell. If your target is undead, and you hit, it will have disadvantage on attack rolls against you until the end of your next turn. Many may think that targeting undead with necrotic damage is unwise, but immunity and resistance to it aren't as common as you might think amongst the undead. Anything that you target and hit with this spell also can't regain hit points until the start of your next turn. That doesn't just shut down healing spells and items, but also regeneration and other such abilities. This can be huge against the right enemies. Monsters like trolls or even vampires can be crazy hard to kill if you don't have the proper tools to deal with them. And this is a cantrip that you can use at will. I mean, sure, Firebolt can give you similar results on, say, a troll, but Chill Touch does the same thing with any creature that has some way of healing. Now, on to why we're choosing 2 attack cantrips, which are probably going to be our only cantrips for the first 9 levels of our career. We're going to make some assumptions for this next part, but they seem pretty logical to me. We're going to be mad.
I think I done just got mad.
No, not that kind of mad. Multiple ability score dependent. We'll probably want a good strength to swing our sword with, a good constitution for survival and even concentration checks, and a decent intelligence for our spellcasting. That doesn't leave a lot of room for anything more than a 10 in dexterity, if even that. On most fighters, if we needed to engage enemies at range, we'd pull out our bow and just start gunning them down. We might not be as good with that as our sword, but having dexterity as a tertiary stat isn't that big of a burden, normally. But with the Eldritch Knight, it's not going to be the case. Sure, we'll be able to make multiple attacks with our bow at level 5 and up, but we're probably not going to hit much with it, or do much any significant damage. I mean, 1d8, or maybe even 1d8 minus 1, not very compelling. Also, we're probably going to slap on the heaviest armor we can, so dexterity is probably going to be a dumb stat or close to it. As for throwing javelins or something, true, we would be better at that, but rules is written, unless you have a particular fighting style or something, you can only ever throw 1 weapon at a time. And they have a pretty short range. A javelin is as good as it gets with a short range of 30 feet and a long range of 120. And as a thrown weapon, it can use strength instead of dexterity for attack and damage. But we don't need to worry about any of that. We have ranged attack cantrips to use instead. Why throw javelins or use a crappy bow when we can touch others with our cold magical hands and smash them with our mystical gongs?
What?
That sounded better in my head. But don't issue bows and javelins completely. The Eldritch Knight's War Magic feature lets us make weapon attacks as a bonus action after using a cantrip with an action. So you might as well make the best of it. Number 3, Blade Ward. This one has more to do with the previously mentioned War Magic feature for the Eldritch Knight. This 0th level abjuration spell takes an action to cast and has a range of self that lasts for 1 round. Until the end of your next turn, you have resistance to piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning weapon damage, meaning you only take half damage from those sources. So why would we sacrifice 2, 3, or even 4 attacks to just cast some measly cantrip? The strategy here is simple. When you know you're about to get swarmed by bad guys, you can use this cantrip to mitigate the oncoming onslaught. You may even encourage it. Buff yourself with this cantrip and charge into a horde of enemies. You might have the shield spell to augment your armor class, reducing the hit chance, and when you do get hit, you can reduce it by half. But even trickier, you can actually encourage them to attack you by provoking attacks of opportunity. Maybe you run by them or retreat without disengaging. Why would you do that, you might ask? Well, maybe these enemies have a reaction that you really don't want them to use. By provoking attacks of opportunity, you can trick them into using their reaction to feebly scratch upon your defenses. You're going to have access to the shield spell, good armor, maybe even a shield, and this defensive cantrip. You should be able to survive whatever they throw at you. And now, they can't do whatever that nasty thing that you really didn't want them to do. Maybe they have counterspell, and you're protecting your primary mage. Or they have the parry feature, making them extremely hard to hit. They might even have a reactionary teleport feature for when they get hit, making them really hard to pin down. All of that is unusable if they use their reaction to swing at little old you. And as a bonus, pun intended, you can use your bonus action to make an attack with the War Magic feature. So you can still get some damage in, even when you're using your action for this cantrip. And sometimes, your attacks, for whatever reason, might not be very effective against the enemy. But maybe some of your other party members, probably the dedicated casters, can affect your enemies. Blade Ward gives you a way to get in the enemy's face and suffer some of their attacks and take their attention away from the members of your party that can actually hurt them. And that is what makes a good team member. Well, that's our video of only 3 cantrips for the Eldritch Knight in D&D 5e. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, smash that like button, tell me in the comments below what cantrips you would use and what strategies as well. Check out these other videos if you're so inclined, and I'll see you in the parlor.